Now we proceed to the heart of the matter at hand. Some of the ancient ruling families have sought to exterminate a significant portion of the human species, and in many cases they have succeeded. Hundreds of millions of human bodies lay buried in the earth, lives extinguished in the name of progress, democracy, or whatever marketing slogan du jour to suit the predictable tastes of their ignorant captives. Hundreds of millions lay dead at the feet of the imperial fetish known as socialism alone, yet the youth of the developed world clamor for it as if it were a new spring fashion or a Pokemon video game. A more staggering testament to the scripted doctrines of the modern schooling system could scarcely be asked for. We are taught that, in order to help others, we must enslave ourselves. Nothing could be further from the truth. The modern schooling method, few are aware, was developed in Prussia. Not Russia, Prussia, a now defunct empire located in the modern country of Germany. After losing the war against Napoleon, the elite Prussian families conducted an inquiry as to why their war tactics had failed. They found that many of their soldiered men had, when asked to charge into a suicidal situation ahead on the front lines, instead deserted their posts and fled to preserve their own lives. As a result of these findings, a new educational program was installed for the purpose of producing citizens who were more compliant to commands, who would be more likely to follow the orders of another equally human actor in a position of presumed authority, even to their own detriment. Fast forward about a century and a half, and we have a Prussian-inspired indoctrination system masquerading as an operation of higher learning. Sciences are stunted in the paradigm of thinking that should have naturally expired over a century ago. Kids are taught to think that reading is a chore, an unpleasant experience whose only joy is found when it ceases. Students hunched over desks pore over the words of some dead or living author, comparing one system of categorization to another, without the skeleton key that unlocks the meaning of them all. The key of spiritual truth, of self-existence, that exposes every lie and reveals each truth. Nevertheless, life finds a way, and the children of the sun always trust their self more than the master. While some individuals and families have certainly advocated and pursued the willful destruction of the human race, others within the occult orders and ruling families do not share such a malicious demeanor. They may perceive a need or opportunity to govern and structure human activity in a manner that leads to coherent, centralized outcomes. They may even also be willing to lie in order to fulfill such a goal. They do not, however, see a need to kill billions more human brothers and sisters in order to achieve a peaceable world. It is in this struggle among these hidden factions that we now find the apocalyptic election in the United States between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. It should come as no surprise to those who have done their homework that the Clinton crime family is an integral component of the occult network that includes the Bush family as well as the Rockefeller family. This network exerts an inordinate level of influence over several key aspects of industry in the developed world, including oil and gas, the medical industrial complex, the military industrial complex, Wall Street banking, and the mainstream media. Trump has lived a happy and successful life dealing with elements of this structure, probably accepting, as many others, that it is all simply an unavoidable consequence of the status quo. Still, Trump's verbal record attests to his dissatisfaction with such a state of affairs. We must never forget, as I said in the beginning, that no matter how powerful the man, each is always liable to make mistakes. The Bush, Clinton, Rockefeller clan has overplayed their hand too many times, and burned too many bridges with a hubristic reliance on force and threats of force when certain other actors are resistant to comply with their imperial demands. Many of those actors, from families evicted from foreclosed homes built by fraudulent banking money magic, to the Asians, Africans, Europeans, and First Nations peoples who have been divested of their land and culture, have had enough of this clan of maniacs. They have chosen to resist this faction at all costs and remove them from their positions of presumed authority. This truly revolutionary struggle even extends within the U.S. military, especially in the all-critical combat theater of Syria, wherein foreign terrorists backed by the CIA are fighting Syrians backed by the Pentagon, in addition to Russia, and as of this week, China as well. The resolution of this battle will affect every human on planet Earth. One outcome of this situation is that the maniacal faction of the Bush, Clinton, Rockefeller crime family and their associated cohorts in Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Turkey, as well as the Gulf monarchies like Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, will prevail in fomenting total and utter chaos and violence in not just Syria, but also in the Ukraine, where the faction is assisted by their criminal lackeys that run the European Union project. This will put the BRICS alliance members of Russia, China, and India in a corner, as well as halt the Central Asian infrastructure ambitions that those actors have planned as the major industrial development for the first half of the 21st century. The first half of the 21st century of the prior era, as I esteem it. In truth, if the described outcome does not transpire, and the maniacal actors fail to ignite a third world war, this century will be better known as the first century of an entirely new era for the human race. What we are talking about when we describe a failure of the Bush, Clinton, Rockefeller faction in Syria and the Ukraine really only amounts to an agreement to respect the sovereign wishes of the people who live on those lands. This applies to Crimea, who voted 97% in favor of avoiding the nightmare this faction has brought to the Ukraine and rejoining its mother country of Russia. This applies to the Syrians, who support the leadership of Bashar al-Assad and have no part in the foreign mercenary campaign that the Western media calls rebel fighters rather than hired terrorists. We are all free and beautiful human beings with a cosmic right to move ourselves however we wish. But as long as violent force is accepted in our world as a legitimate means of achieving change, the sovereign people of any land possess the natural right to secure the borders of their territory in order to protect their people and families from attack. This applies to Arab states as well as Jewish states, from the northern border of the Irish Republic to the southern border of the United States to the border of Greece and Austria among the European Union members controlling the wild immigrant flow stemming into their countries from Turkey and Syria and other Middle Eastern countries. From gated communities to private firearm ownership, all human beings are entitled to provide for their own defense. No human being is entitled, however, to initiate aggressive violence upon another. The maniacal faction under discussion has not the slightest quantum amount of respect for the principle that living beings have a right to exist without being coerced, tortured, or killed. If this faction succeeds in the present struggle, this will be accompanied by the accession to power of their frail and degenerate mouthpiece, Hillary Clinton, to her own personal throne over the people of the United States. Russia, China, India, and Iran will be militarily confronted in a world war scenario. The widely perceived illegitimacy of another Clinton regime will likely lead to a civil war scenario in the United States, when Clinton inevitably triggers Obama's executive orders and declares the United States a battlefield in order to take command of firearms, the internet, and key industries and territory. All in all, the empire will persist in this scenario about 10 to 20 more years at most before economic factors and climate extremes driven by a grand solar minimum drive the cabal to collapse anyway. If, however, we can stand united at this key moment in history and use our individual powers together in our concerted effort to expose the truth about these public criminals who purport to rule our lives, we will see paradise in our time. We will not see a new world order, but a global board of directors, at which table the United States, Israel, Britain, and affiliated cohort nations will not preside over as corrupt rulers, much like the current regime of the United Nations, but as managing members and partners in a global project to clean up the environmental devastation wrought by this faction and others, build resilient economic resource structures in the developing world, and set the stage for the next leg of human evolution on the path toward God consciousness, inner and outer space travel. John Fitzgerald Kennedy tried to take us down that road, and the cabal had him ritually executed in Dallas in November 1963. Never forget that he himself was an elite. He was a member of the elite families. But he fought to improve the lives of his people. Elections can be rigged, but for some reason, the Brexit vote for Britain to leave the European Union was not. The cabal wanted the UK to remain in the European Union, but the people of the UK didn't, and they got the Brexit outcome. The cabal wants world war for America, but if we, the American people, do not, then we will see a Donald Trump presidency. The world is watching, and time will tell. Blessings to you all. I hope you take this message as I've intended it, simply to help and provide a little clarity on a very complex and important topic of our times. Wholeness and balanced vibrations. Cheers.